and it taps you right on the chin, like, what are you supposed to do about that if he catches you on the chin with that flying knee? It's the last thing you're expecting from Derek Lewis. So, I'm not totally down and out on Marcos Rogerio de Lima, and I'm not totally sold on Justin Tafa either. What do you think?
I mean, looking at it like this, I think you summarized it perfectly. Justin Tafa could put people out, but if you're against, if you're not low bottom tier, which Marcos Rogerio may be trending towards bottom tier UFC, Justin Tafa is not going to knock you out. But then Marcos Rogerio de Lima, just coming off that knockout, it was an older Derek Lewis. He was susceptible to the knee strike and then was finished on the ground. But is he going to have the same, or is he going to have a chin impediment, I guess you could say, against Justin Tafa? Just the same, if Justin Tafa isn't able to knock him out, Rogerio de Lima definitely has better 3-round experience, probably a better gas tank and better fight management. I could see Justin Tafa getting gassed real early, going for a finish that just doesn't end up coming to fruition against Rogerio de Lima. This one, I think ultimately, if I was going to pick who I think is more likely to win, I could see it going. I think it's 50-50. You know what I mean? Justin Tafa is going to have more energy to begin, and he's going to go and he's going to headhunt. He's going to look for a knockout. And as the fight goes on, I think it sways more into the corner of Rogerio de Lima, being able to grind it out, land a couple more strikes, have a little bit of a ground game, and just have a little bit better cardio to win the second and the third round. So that being said, having said that, now I'm going to say I think Justin Tafa is going to end up taking it because he's 30 years old. He doesn't have a great gas tank. He did come in at 265 right at the last time. So I think if he come in just a little bit below that, and have a little bit of gas tank to be able to win a second round, because I think he's probably going to win the first round going out there throwing heavier punches. If he can win the first round and steal a second round and just not get finished in the third, I think he could win a decision in that regard. I think he's younger, probably has a little bit better of a cardio, has more career to him. And I guess at 30 years old, you could expect him to improve a little bit better. He's got the power in his hands that, obviously is always good to have. And Rogerio de Lima at, 38 years old, coming off a knockout, as hindering as it was, or as odd as it was against Derek Lewis. I understand all that, but in this case, I'm going with the plus 125 30-year-old to get it done because he's got the knockout power in his hands, and as long as if he could just win that second round, I think we're in business.
Yeah, I don't really have a pick for this fight. Like, I feel like it could go either way. I wouldn't throw my wallet at it. Except for maybe it not to go the distance. I like that pick quite a bit. Somebody's going to go to sleep. If I had to pick, I'd probably go with Vegas and side with Marcos Rogerio de Lima as opposed to the Tapology voters. Vegas sometimes has a better handle on it, and I don't think that his last showing was really representative of who Marcos Rogerio de Lima is. And I don't think Justin Tafa is going to come out throwing the flying knees that Derek Lewis did the last time around. So, but I'm not taking one side or the other in particular in this one. If I had to, that's where I'd go. How do you want to do this? You want to jump into the rest of the prelim notables?
Well, I do want to hear which one of these prelim fights you would put your money on. But before we do that, let's roll the intro. It's time! What's going on, everybody?
Yeah, what's kicking? We're back for another episode of Pickin Fights. Just want to ask everybody, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're here, jump in the chat. Let us know what you think, what your picks are for UFC 298, Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. That's our main event. Going to be a wild one. We got a really great card. Excited to jump into it. You can also listen to this on Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram @_Pickin Fights and @Pickin Keith and @Pickin Fights Tom. I do have another prelim notable fight. If you want to just jump right in there, I got.
My bad.
No, I jumped the gun there. I have the opener for this entire event, Andrea Lee versus Miranda Maverick, and I am going to be going with Miranda Maverick here, siding with Vegas, siding with the Tapology voters. Andrea Lee has given me nothing to be impressed about so far in the UFC, and her last 3 fights have been losses. She's on a bad 3-fight skid. Miranda Maverick, on the other hand, her losses have all been controversial pretty much to this point. As memory serves, right? Yeah, she had that Yep. Priscilla Cachoeira. The Aaron Blanchfield one was the only one that, like, when you look back, it was, it felt to me because Aaron Blanchfield is on her way up right now. Anyways, this fight's probably going to go the distance, in my opinion. I think that Miranda Maverick is going to just out wrestle Andrea Lee. She has the hands to strike with Andrea Lee. Andrea Lee's like not super great on her feet. She's not a great wrestler, and Miranda Maverick is a great wrestler. So she's going to go in there, take her down, and be a wet blanket for 3 rounds. So I have Miranda Maverick winning this one, and most likely by decision. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Miranda Maverick does have the opportunity to go in there and potentially pull off a submission, just like Priscilla Cachoeira. Andrea Lee, she does have that one submission win recently 3 years ago against Antonina Shevchenko with a triangle armbar. I think that's obviously much less likely to happen here against Miranda Maverick. I think she's going to have the advantage on the ground. She's going to have youth on her side. She's going to be more rapidly improving at the ripe old age of 26 years old versus Andrea Lee's 35. She's a little bit smaller, and I think when it comes to a grappling game, that helps. And recently, I heard an opinion that sometimes shorter arms can be good for MMA because you don't get as wiry, especially if the fight comes in close. The shorter arms give you a little bit more strength, a little bit more leverage in that regard. So I think all of that is making me go towards Miranda Maverick here. She is minus 205, which actually isn't that heavy of a price to just lay on her, lay on her straight. I think minus 205, she's a safer bet than minus 205 would have you spending in order to get that back. So yeah, I mean, I know we don't usually go by units here, but I would go 2.5, 3 units on Miranda Maverick right now to get this one done. I think she could potentially pull off a submission. She could potentially get a decision. Who knows? She may even grind out a ground and pound victory over Andrea Lee here with just top control and pressure. So I'm not as confident on the way that it's going to happen, but in terms of who's going to win, I'm going with Miranda Maverick right there with you.
Cool. You got one for us? You got any more?
Yeah, I want to talk about Val Woodburn taking on Oban Elliott, the Welsh gangster. Looking at these two guys' tabologies, I mean, just very we're not sharing at all. I wanted to look at their tabology page, and I exited out. This is a high quality production here, folks, on Super Bowl Sunday. We got 3 people watching with us. If you got any comments, any thoughts, any prelim notables that you guys are looking forward to the most, let us know. Any bets that you don't hear us talking about, chime in here. But you got Oban Elliott, the Welsh gangster, coming in here. I believe both of these guys are making their UFC. Not Val Woodburn. We saw him against Bo Nickel, in which he just got sacrificed to Bo Nickel, knocked out, taken out in the first round, TKO to punches to a wrestler. We see that more and more with Bo Nickel. More people are paying attention to defending the grappling and just, anyone with hands, power, and, kind of a strong trunk, I guess, if you will, could come in here and end up knocking guys out with good enough training. He's 30 years old. Prior to his UFC, he was undefeated coming in. Lewis Mello, a decision over him, a guy who's 30-16-3, 17-8, 3-1, and then 3-1 in terms of his victories outside of the UFC. Claiming Jamaica, fighting out of Florida, Fusion XL Performance. One of my friends is down there. I actually wanted to talk about this one, not because I think Val Woodburn is going to necessarily get the victory here, but I did want to talk about it because I think Val Woodburn is not being given the credit he deserves following that loss to Bo Nickel. I think everyone's just writing him off as somebody who was brought into the UFC to lose and now was given an obligatory second chance at it. I wouldn't be as strong to say that. I think Val Woodburn has shown that he has some solid grappling, and if he had the opportunity, I think he could get some victories on the feet. Now, a couple KOs to some guys who are inexperienced, and a couple decision victories to guys who are experienced doesn't necessarily go a long way to translate the power that he has in his hands here. I think Oban Elliott, however, 9-2, minus 290 out of Wales, coming over to make his UFC debut. He got a majority decision against Cock Brito on the Contender Series, but that was such a back and forth fight and such an exciting fight that he got called up to the UFC. Anyway, 26 years old, obviously young. I think this is going to be a really good scrap between two guys who are destined to, or not destined, but really trying to make an impact inside the UFC. This is a pretty notable that I wanted to talk about because I think it's set for fireworks. I think Val Woodburn is being aggressively underrated in the sense because of that last performance against Bo Nickel, where he was just, obviously, listen, Bo Nickel is looking like he could potentially be knew he was a world beater in grappling. So anyone who is a strong grappler is probably going to be at a disadvantage there. And he's showing that his grappling is so strong that his knockout power is something to be worried about too. So that would be a problem for anybody. So I want to give Val Woodburn some respect here. Oban Elliott, he is definitely a gangster in his own right, as you see in his name, the Welsh gangster, coming in submissions, decisions, and definitely not maybe the same level of power in his hands. So I think this one is actually going to go to decision, and that's the one that I want to take here. You can see a lot of the Tapology voters are going to decision. So I want to take this one to go to decision. I think it's going to be a firefight. I think they're going to trade on the feet because they both have some solid ground game. And I think we could see some back and forth grappling, a really good grappling match here if it does go to the ground. So I want to take this fight to go to decision. Ultimately, I think I'll go with the underdog at plus 235, Val Woodburn, to get it done. He's heavier here. This is what are they fighting this fight at? I'm not even seeing here. I have the most recent 5 at 170.
Scroll up.
Welterweight at 170. So Val Woodburn is going to be the bigger guy if he can make that weight in a grappling battle. Now it depends on how this is going to go into the third round here, but as a strong grappler, weighing a little bit more could be a big advantage. So I'm going decision here. I don't think that we're going to see this one get finished by two guys who are accomplished in that area.
That's interesting. Yeah. I am going to stay away from this one as well, just because you kind of I wouldn't have come anywhere near betting on Val Woodburn or considering this to be a great fight or anything like that. And, initially I thought maybe this would just be an easy knockout loss for Val, because the way that he came out against Bo Nickel, he just got dominated. Yeah, it was a last-minute signing, short notice fight. Bo Nickel really was not known for his hands up until that point, maybe throwing that sloppy high kick to start a fight and then going into his wrestling. And he made Val Woodburn look really not great, in the same way that Sean O'Malley toyed with Chris Moutinho. Bo Nickel just has more power and was popping in and out. Anyways, Val Woodburn didn't look adept. But because of the way that you spoke about this fight, I don't want to bet that Val Woodburn's going to get knocked out again. So I'm just going to stay away from it, because that's initially what I thought was going to happen. And you dissuaded me. So I'm going to have to stay away from that one. I do want to talk about a guy, and he's a really crazy favorite in this fight. Rinya Nakamura. He's fighting Carlos Vera. Rinya Nakamura has been a wild favorite in the UFC a couple of times. Comes out of Japan. He's not really a well-known name, but every time he's in the UFC, he's a minus 800, minus 700 favorite. He's been finishing opponents. His last fight was a decision, but it was a really dominant decision. Before that, it's been a couple of finishes in the UFC that have been absolutely nuts. I'm surprised he's not more of a name. I mean, it's probably because he doesn't speak English and he's not from the region, and it's hard to get him over here sometimes. He doesn't really fight that often. We're starting to see him pick back up. He came through on that road to the UFC. I suppose that's the Asian continent version of Dana White's looking for a fight. It's great. They feature these guys in a lot of these cards, and Rinya Nakamura's been here a couple of times. He's a scary bantamweight. He's got a lot of power, and he's got great submission jiu-jitsu. He's a prototype almost of what the next version of a UFC fighter is going to be where he's just good in all angles, and it's not he's lacking anywhere. Rinya Nakamura, it's only a matter of time until he starts getting these big opponents, big names. And then he'll become a marketable star at some point. We've seen Shohei Ohtani, the bag that he gets, and another Japanese athlete that doesn't speak English. It's very marketable to a certain audience, and I buy into it. I like Rinya Nakamura. He has a great skill set, and I think he's a minus $850. Think about this: you have to put $850 to win $100 when you bet on Rinya Nakamura. So it's not really worth betting on unless you're going to go for a first round finish, which I think it could be, maybe first or second round. Carlos Vera is tough competition. He doesn't really go down. He's 11-3, but I think Rinya Nakamura is just going to make him look the way that he has made everybody else look, and a step behind. So I'm going with Rinya Nakamura. What do you got, Tom?
Yeah, I can't go with Carlos Vera here. One thing that I do want to note is that Carlos Vera sometimes, for being a ground specialist, not having very many, if any, knockouts on his record. The one thing that I've seen or I found with Carlos Vera is the fact that sometimes he can get overzealous in the grappling and find himself in a submission situation where I think Rinya Nakamura, the thing that makes him so good is his like the fact that he doesn't make those same mistakes. He doesn't find himself in bad situations. And I think against Carlos Vera in a matchup here of who's going to make the first mistake, I think, Rinya Nakamura is kind of taking himself out of contention for that title. And Carlos Vera, I think, is going to, if he decides to go to the ground, which I think would be his main game plan here, I think he's going to find himself potentially in a situation where he makes a wrong move here or gets a little overzealous, and Rinya Nakamura is right there in a similar way that, we saw yesterday. I forget exactly which fight it was, but, we saw a guy get on top and just slowly but surely take control. Actually, it was against Joe Pfeiffer. It was Jack Hermanson. We just saw slowly but surely in the fourth and the fifth round when Jack Hermanson would get on top, he would just slowly but surely, almost like a boa constrictor, just take what Joe Pfeiffer was giving him, tighten up, and then out of nowhere he would bring a leg over, and now he advances the position. Joe tried to put his hands on the hips to clear and try and get out. And then, Jack Hermanson just went with it, went to his back, transitioned to a rear naked. When Joe moved around to try to combat that, he was just right there. And now he was in full mount as they transitioned back. So just like a boa constrictor, just one, small move after another, taking what the guy on bottom gives him. I think Rinya Nakamura would potentially do the same thing in this fight here against Carlos Vera. First mistake loses. I'm going with Rinya Nakamura to get it done. And I think a submission or at least a finish it could be expected here.
Yeah, you brought up Joe Pfeiffer. We both had Joe Pfeiffer winning that one. I hope Rinya doesn't make us look the same way that Joe did last night. Because there's nothing worse than those DMs like, hey, you promised a Joe Pfeiffer first round knockout. And it's like, I didn't promise anything.
I kind of did, though. But
I'm just making predictions. And also, I want to mention, too, I've been having like this crazy radar with like hype trains that are about to get derailed. And I'll talk about one later today. But yeah, last night I texted you pretty much right before that Joe Pfeiffer, Jack Hermanson fight started and said,
it was honestly before that. It was like an hour and a half, 2 hours before it started.
Yeah, that's the main card was starting. And I did the same thing. I said it with Mike Malott and Neal Magny too, where I was like, I have a weird gut feeling about this. And, so don't ever get too confident in our picks. Like, you have to do your own research as well. Some people tell you that it's bad to do your own research in the year 2024, but look into things yourself as well and make your own decisions. But I like Rinya Nakamura here. I'm good on the prelims. Do you have any more that you want to touch on before we move to the main card?
Yeah, nothing that I'm specifically dying to talk about. Let's go to the main card.
Let's do it.
All right, moving on to the main card. Which fight do we got first? We have Anthony Hernandez, Fluffy Hernandez, taking on Roman Kopylov. What do you think?
I got Roman Kopylov here. I like Roman Kopylov a lot. We got to see him live at the Prudential Center. Great kickboxer. He's got crazy kicks, right? That body kick, that head kick, his kicking game is insane. And his hands are, not too far behind either. But the highlight is really the kicking. And he switches it up so well. He sets up things. And he's a guy that, like, when you hear him get on the microphone and you see him speak afterwards and you look at his body language, he almost seems, I don't know, like Cro-Magnon or just overall, like, just so awkward. And, but maybe that has to do with the language barrier. I don't know. I don't know how he's an underdog here because he's shown us a lot since getting into the UFC. He's finished a lot of guys. And I think he's going to do it again. I think that he's a good underdog pick. I think the kickboxing is just overwhelming. And he's like a big brute, He just walks guys down and just lays that body kick until they start dropping their hands. And here comes a head kick. Good night. So I'm going with Roman Kopylov here. What do you got, Tom?
Yeah, this one's going to be – this is tough to kind of parse out, because I feel like we've seen ever since that loss to Albert Duraev by decision a little over 2 years ago, we've seen Roman Kopylov really come into his own here, 32 years old, start to really command the octagon, land that front kick, be really good with that leg, with those legs and keeping distance, which is what he's going to try and do against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, who without a doubt, even though he has some good striking and he had finished Edmund Sabajian 8 months ago in his most recent fight. Sorry, I have a little bit of a list, but
can you hear me?
This morning. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you. I think your mic's shut out. Now I can hear you. There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, I was saying that if I sound odd, which is odd that came up, it's because I bit my tongue this morning. So I don't know what was going on with that. But nevertheless, if you can hear me now, I was saying that Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, despite the knockout victory that he got over Edmund Shabazian via ground and pound a little over 8 months ago, his bread and butter is still the ground game with submissions over submission specialist Marc-Andre Barriault and Rodolfo Vieira, who we just saw got a win yesterday and looked phenomenal at it. Anthony Hernandez is going to, try to take this to the ground. Let's look at what the people on Tapology have. And despite that submission, that submission prowess and ability on Fluffy Hernandez's part, 88.3% going with Roman Kopylov by TKO. And I'm going to have to agree with them. The plus 150 underdog here out of Russia, 32 years old, so a little bit older here, generally the same size guy. I like his ability with the striking to keep guys off of him. He did that with Alessio Di Chirico, Punahele Soriano, Claudio Ribeiro, and Josh Fremd. Now, not all of these guys are top caliber. So I think there is the possibility that Fluffy can get in there and can take him down. But I think Roman Kopylov, we've seen a lot of him for him just being 32 years old. I think his time in the UFC has been rather short. Considering, coming in what is here? His first fight was in 2019, but then we saw him again in 2021. So a big time away here, which he had a bunch of fights canceled and COVID. Exactly, Jordan Wright. He hasn't had the opportunity to really fight too far up, but round 3 victory, round two. I think we're seeing him have this style that lands hard punches that accumulate over time, and people have ended up giving in. He also, I want to note, has no submission. He's only one submission loss in his entire career. That coming against Carl Roberson via rear naked choke in round 3, 4 minutes in. That I think is a little bit more of a cardio issue that as we've seen him go on, he started to figure out. So I have a lot of confidence in Roman Kopylov's ability to keep guys off of him and go the full 3 rounds with that wear and tear from his striking style building up over time. I think we're going to see Roman Kopylov go to the body a lot and go to the leg a lot to try and stop Hernandez from taking him down. If Hernandez is able to take him down and get him to the ground, we haven't seen too much of Roman Kopylov on the ground. But I'm going to hope for the sake of my prediction that he's able to, escape a submission attempt, or it's going to take Fluffy Hernandez too long or too far into the round to actually get anything. And if he is able to get Roman Kopylov to the ground, it's going to be up against the fence, in which he has challenges to deal with in that regard too. I think Kopylov is just really good at distance management, quick leg strikes, and then, striking the opponent's leg and debilitating them and being able to really land on them and accumulate into the second and the third round. So I'm going with Roman Kopylov to get this one done. What do you think?
2 things I want to highlight on that you brought up is like the gap between, the COVID time that was really hard for a lot of fighters to get in there. But since then, 2021 on, he's been super active. There's a lot of guys that we haven't seen get 5 fights in a 2-year span. And then the other thing is Roman Kopylov throws a lot of feints, and he's very herky jerky when he's fighting. He's very in your face. He's walking guys down, and that doesn't bode well with the power coming your way from him, because, like you mentioned, since that Albert Duraev fight, the initiative from Roman Kopylov seemed to go from point striking to I'm going to put your lights out. And so I think that herky jerkiness of it, the feints that he throws, and the awkwardness of it, it really spells trouble for anybody. And if Anthony Hernandez tries to take him down, we've seen Roman Kopylov get back up and throw nasty things down the pipe too, coming right up the middle when guys try to take him down. Speaking of takedowns, we're really getting into the meat and potatoes of this card now. we're gonna have a technical wrestling match, I believe here. I mean, it could go one of two ways. I think this fight between Merab Dvalishvili and Henry Cejudo, it could go one of two ways where both of these guys respect the wrestling so much coming right back at them that they're going to be more inclined to throw hands, or you have Henry Cejudo, who is an Olympic gold medalist, right, in wrestling. Was he a gold medalist? Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. Triple C.
Right. Yeah, Olympic gold medalist going up against Merab, who doesn't have the same accolades, but is a great MMA fighter. And in my opinion, it kind of feels like Henry Cejudo's time has come and gone. I think that last push against Aljamain Sterling was probably like his last like win now opportunity. At 37 years old, I don't really see a world where Henry Cejudo works his way back up to the belt. Merab Dvalishvili does have that chance. He's got momentum. He's working his way up. He's got the skill set. I think he's got better hands and a lot more power behind him than Henry Cejudo. He's beat a lot of great fighters like Petr Yan. With all that being said, I just think the skill set, the speed, the youth, it's all on Merab's side. Henry Cejudo is going to be a step slower. I don't think he's going to get finished in this fight. I think it's going to be very competitive. But you're going to see Merab Dvalishvili come out on top. Maybe he drops one round to Henry, maybe the second round. But I think you're going to see a mostly dominant fight from Merab Dvalishvili. I wouldn't say that the fight against Aljamain was like so dominant. You know, Henry Cejudo did lose that one on the scorecards pretty definitively. But and then you have Merab, who's Aljo's training partner and best friend, I suppose. Going in there to fight Henry. It's going to be a similar game plan. They have similar styles. So it's Merab all the way. I think at minus 190, that's a good bet where you can take him straight up. Bet responsibly, obviously. We're not responsible for your bets, but at minus 190, I like him here quite a bit. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I think I would actually make that line a little bit tighter because this would be probably, we talk about Merab and the guys he's fought, Petr Yan, Jose Aldo, Marlon Moraes, Cody Stamann, John Dodson, a lot of guys who have some good grappling and good wrestling, but none that really specialize it, and certainly none that have been an Olympic gold medalist caliber wrestler in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see how his style, those aggressive takedowns and just that high motor, high energy, how that works against a guy like Henry Cejudo, who knows how to defend takedowns and wants to get them himself. In this case, though, I'm going to go with the guy who's been not taking a layoff. As cerebral as Henry Cejudo is, or maybe, or is trying to convey that he is, and he very well may be. I'm really not sure. I don't have enough grappling IQ to really, tell if what he is saying and how intelligent he is right or not. Who knows? He's talking basically rocket science to us. He's so many levels ahead. That being said, is that going to be enough to contend with just the overall machine that is Merab? No pun intended with his nickname, but that really is a very dually came to nickname where, he is a machine in his fight down, that he keeps that relentless pressure, and he's going to continue to take you down. He may not do anything with that takedown, but, he's going to get that pressure. And at the very least, that's where he's going to win. I think Henry Cejudo might have better striking than Merab. He might. But I think, it's going to be really interesting to see, because any advancement in striking that we see from Henry is going to be based off of his grappling game, and that somebody is, not necessarily looking to go to the ground with him, and he uses that to his advantage to proceed to striking. Somebody who's trying to take him to the ground actively. We saw Henry Cejudo have a back and forth fight with Aljamain Sterling, in which Aljamain was able to get 3 of the rounds. It was pretty tightly contested, and I think Henry even said that, had he had a little bit more activity, he feels like he would have been able to perform well there. I think Merab beats Aljamain just because of the styles and the matchup. I think Merab's aggressive takedowns prevent you from trying to take him down, and I think Henry Cejudo can try to defend the takedown all he wants. Merab is going to have a better gas tank. He's going to keep coming. He's going to keep coming. He's going to keep coming. And that's going to end up winning him the decision on the scorecard, because they're going to see all of that pressure and that timing control, even if it's up against the fence, and give it to Merab, because you can't possibly give the guy who's defending the takedown, but as their back up against the wall, even though they're throwing little baby punches, I don't think you're going to be able to give him those rounds just based off of that. And then Henry's going to be able to say, look at my striking advantage. Look at how many more strikes I landed, but they were all in close. And even if he did land 1 or 2, 2. The 2, 3, 4 minutes of the round is going to be taken up by Merab with his pressure, whether it's up against the cage, in top position, trying to go for a takedown on a single leg. Like, no matter what it is, I think we're just going to see this insane Merab pressure, and that's going to ultimately get him the decision. Again, it's only a 3-round fight here. So I think it's going to be a lot easier for Merab to keep up that extremely high pace. If it was 5 rounds, I would say maybe a little bit more Henry, and the striking can come into it, and maybe he will be able to tire Merab out by, having him go for takedowns for 25 straight minutes. But in 15, Merab can go for takedowns for 15 total minutes, 15 minutes straight. So I think it's all in his corner, and I think minus 190 is, honestly, I think 190 is a little steep. I would have this a little bit more even, because if Henry, being the adept grappler that he is able to defend a takedown and maybe even reverse it on Merab, who knows what can happen with Henry in top position. We haven't even seen Merab on the bottom too much, so we don't know what that looks like either. So what do you think?
Yeah, sound logic. I like Merab. I like Merab a lot here. That's all I got to say about that. I mentioned before hype trains being derailed potentially, and I have a feeling that Geoff Neal actually gets it done against Ian Machado Garry this week.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah, I don't know if now this is going into bias and now I'm like trusting my internal instinct too much, but you look at Geoff Neal's last fight as an indication. His fight against Shavkat Rakhmonov, he hung in there until the 3rd round. Shavkat he's so much more tenacious than Ian Garry. I think he packs a lot more power in his punch. He's got a lot more to offer with the grappling and the submission. I mean, look at the standing rear naked choke. That's what it took to get Geoff Neal out of that fight, though. It was really like a surprise attack. He kind of snuck it in there in the clinch, and it was beautiful by Shavkat. I just don't think that Ian Garry brings the same skills to the table. And with Geoff Neal being in there to hang in with Shavkat striking, and I think Shavkat is potentially I don't know, Ian Garry might be the better striker out of him and Shavkat, but I think Shavkat is more well-rounded. And the way that Ian Garry only brings his striking to the table, and Geoff Neal's experience, skill set, he's a vet. He's a true vet. He's in that Neil Magny category of, like, veterans, and that's why, like, those guys go up against these up-and-coming prospects. I think there's a chance he gets it done against Ian Garry, because of just the nature of being a veteran in this game. And when you have a guy that's a little bit one-dimensional like an Ian Garry, it's, sometimes you see a guy get in there and pull off a victory. It's not going to be pretty. I think it's going to be an out-striking, it's going to be a striking clinic for Ian Garry, maybe round 1 up against the fence. He likes to use those push kicks and really just like drive body shots into his opponent. But definitely was the hardest test for Ian Garry up to this point. And I don't think Ian Garry is going to pass. There's been so much like controversy around Ian Garry. It's simmered down a little bit, but it's going to pick up over this week. Geoff Neal's a class act, so you may not see him engage in too much of that stuff. But also, Ian Garry did come after Geoff Neal personally. So, and Ian Garry can dish it, but he can't take it. So I think any sort of mental warfare coming back his way is going to negatively impact him. He'll talk about suing Geoff Neal rather than trying to take it out of the cage on Saturday. So with all that being a factor for Ian Garry going into this one potentially, the one-sided nature of it, the one-dimensional nature of him as a fighter, and the mental headspace that he's been in, I'm going to go with Geoff Neal here. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I wish I could agree with you. And as much as I would want to agree with you, I think if I did take Geoff Neal, a lot of it would probably be me just rooting against Ian Garry here. And listen, I think what you said definitely has, it carries weight and it carries water, because I think Ian Garry having to fight, and defend like his relationship with his wife, his kids. And I think as much as he laughs it off and shakes it off, I think it is getting to him. Now having picked a fight with Rampage Jackson, where he's like, oh, I'm not going to be on your show then, you stupid cunt. Like, I think making all those videos, he thinks that it's him defending himself and it's him winning and him getting over on people, but I'm not so sure that it is. I think it's ends up being him, being maybe a little bit distracted. And, I understand that you're training, for an hour and a half sessions, 2 hour sessions, 2 to 3 times a day to get ready for these fights. So that in totality is like, 6, 7, 8 hours. There's a lot of hours that go into the day that he could have to be on Twitter or making comments and whatnot. So I think that doesn't necessarily mean that it's taking away, but I don't know how well he's compartmentalizing having to fight off people on the internet, people potentially that he's seeing on the street, people on social media all the time, let alone his own thoughts. And, who knows if they're getting to him or not. But I think in this fight, when it comes down to just technical skill, he's obviously he's going to have the longer legs because he's much taller, even though they have the same reach. He has got good distance management. He does get hit sometimes. We've seen a little bit less and less of it. Like, against Neal Magny, he did get touched up a couple times. He did win. It was a unanimous decision victory. But I feel like we've seen Neal Magny, not so much against D-Rod, not so much against Keenan Song, but against Gabe Green, against Darian Weeks, and actually, if I'm remembering correctly, a little bit against Keenan Song, that, he wasn't looking fantastic. He was getting these decisions, and as much as he's improved, we have seen him, get hits. These haven't been flawless performances on the side of Ian Machado Garry. At 26 years old, he is only getting better, but you wonder how much of this outside stuff is taking away from that process. And Geoff Neal just kind of going about his business, doing what he needs to do. And Ian, why did Garry pull out last time? Was he sick?
Well, it was all going on. All that stuff was going on at the same time as his fight. But yeah, he said he was sick. He was supposed to fight Vicente Luque, who he was like boys with from Sanford or Killcliff. And it was just like so much stuff going on that he said he was sick. And then you had Chael was like the only person that came out and was like, I knew he was actually sick this whole time. As Chael does. So yeah, it was weird,
Yeah, listen, minus 245 is not what I would be putting on it. Maybe in a pure skill matchup, potentially. But in this case, I think there's a lot of other things going on. He's undefeated, so that's coming in with him. The higher you go at undefeated, I think the more that's on the line, the more you're thinking about that, the less or the more you're trying not to lose that. Whereas Geoff Neal at 15-5 kind of knows where he is in the UFC, still trying to improve, still trying to fight, but trying to make money and continuing this as a career. I think Geoff Neal is kind of going in there being like, hey, I ain't got too much to lose. Obviously you don't want to go on a 2-fight losing streak, but when that Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry, two guys that, the UFC has a lot of regard for, I don't think, it's the same level of pressure as if you're on a 2-fight lose streak against someone who's maybe a little bit less notorious, or, I don't want to use notorious because that is probably exactly what Ian Machado would want to call him notorious. But, people are talking about him for the wrong reason. People talked about Conor for the right reason, because he was hyped, because he's cool. People are talking about Ian Machado Garry because his name is in the news, because it's so crazy that he's such a, well, I'll let the viewers fill in the blank, but not very many people are looking at Ian Garry with revere, and they're not looking like, damn, one day I want to be Ian Garry. They're saying, damn, I don't want to end up like that guy. So it's a lot different of a perspective. So if he thinks that, this is good for him and this is something to get behind, he thinks he's pulling the wool over on everybody else, and that they're the stupid cunts. It's like, I don't know. I would look at that mirror. I would turn that mirror the other way. So I'm still going with Garry as the pick, but my heart's not in it, if that means anything.
It does, yeah. I mean, like I said, I've just been having like these gut feelings, and I'm going to trust it this week. Next up, we got Robert Whitaker and Paulo Costa in the co-main event. And Paulo Costa, we saw his last time out against Luke Rockhold. He wasn't able to put Luke Rockhold away, but that was a banger of a fight. I just think that if you're going to be able to beat Robert Whitaker, you have to be able to put Luke Rockhold's lights out. You need to come with power, which Paulo Costa does. I mean, there are different versions of Paulo Costa that we see from fight to fight. Like there was the version of Paulo Costa we saw against Yoel Romero. There was the version of Paulo Costa we saw against Izzy. There was the one against Luke Rockhold that didn't go for the finish and wanted to engage in a bloodbath. So it's a matter of what Paulo Costa comes out tonight on Saturday. When it comes to Robert Whitaker, I think that the Dricus du Plessis fight, it's not that it was a fluke or anything. Dricus did go out there and, use that awkward style and kind of clipped Robert and ended that fight how he did. He got the better of Rob. Like, there's no two ways about it. But Rob was still going in there with his technical striking, and Paulo struggles against really technical strikers like that, like an Izzy that can kind of sit back a little bit and poke away at the body with those teep kicks and those side kicks, and use just a variety of striking. And Paulo Costa is going to want to get in there and use his hands and close the distance. And Rob Whitaker, I think, is just going to keep pushing back and maintaining his distance, using those kicks really well. And when they do engage, it's going to be fireworks for a couple seconds. But I think you're just going to see a super tactical Robert Whitaker, because he wasn't super tactical against Strikers. And Robert Whitaker's a gamer when it comes down to it. He's really intelligent. He's got great striking. He was a champ, and a lot of people make that argument that if it wasn't for Izzy, it would be Rob. And I sometimes agree with that. Not that that's like super relevant to this fight. Just with all that being said, Robert Whitaker has such a skill set, and I don't think the Dricus du Plessis fight is indicative of the future of his career. I think that we're going to see him, become a little bit more of a gatekeeper in this middleweight division, and guys that come up are going to fight him, or we'll see him in these fun fights. And in this one against Paulo Costa, which is like a fun fight, maybe there's title implications. It doesn't really feel like it, just because of all the activity in the middleweight division. It just feels like a fun fight, and I think in a fun fight like this, Robert Whitaker comes out on top. We're going to see him. We're going to see him styling on Paulo Costa, and so I got Robert Whitaker. I think he's probably going to get done by decision. Might see a little bit of blood. Might see a little bit of action going into this into the main event. And I think Rob Whitaker comes out on top. I could say that a few more times, right? I guess, but yeah, I got Rob. So what do you got, Tom?
Is this 3 rounds or 5 rounds?
I believe it's a 3-round fight.
Yeah. Not that it changes who I think is going to win. I think it would just maybe change the method. In a 5-round fight, I think Robert Whitaker wins by finish. If it's a 3-round fight, I think it becomes a lot more probable for a decision. Robert Whitaker, not necessarily known to finish a ton of guys. He's, very cerebral, very technical. Even his losses were by decision. Aside from Dricus, who was first time we ever saw breathing, full oxygen Dricus. After that, the nose surgery. With that being said, I think you pretty much summed it up. Robert Whitaker is very technical. I think any blast, that Paulo Costa comes at in terms of like energy and a bunch of punches is not going to land. And even if it does, Robert Whitaker is going to roll with it or get out of the way enough, have a good enough defense to avoid, taking the full force of it. Paulo Costa, I don't know if anyone else in the entire UFC has done more with less. You look at his career in the UFC is 4 years. Right, his wins are Uriah Hall, who he knocked out 5 years ago. 4.5 years ago, fought Yoel Romero to a decision when Yoel Romero was in his 40s 4 years ago. And then you have 2 losses. What?
That was still a banger, though. Yoel Romero is like 50, and he's still going hard.
Still still a banger. But like in terms of propelling you into top 5-dom.
Right.
And then you have Israel Adesanya that he got knocked out at easy and he was potentially drunk for. Marvin Vettori, that it was just a battle of 2 guys who aren't great technical fighters, but just, going to throw down and throw, for lack of a better term. And then he's got a win 1.5 years ago over Luke Rockhold, who Luke hadn't fought in years and has bad legs and is old. And he was probably in his like late 30s, 40s. So Paulo Costa, 3 wins, all of which being entertaining. None of which being really meaningful in terms of the decision, or the division. Robert Whitaker naturally has fought the best and looked good against the best. The only time he looked even semi-human, I guess, is against Dricus du Plessis. So I think nothing is telling me that Robert Whitaker is not going to get this one done. I think he's going to avoid Paulo Costa. As soon as Paulo gets tired in the second round, that's when you're going to see Rob turn on. And actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm going Robert Whitaker by finish here. I think you're going to see a tired Paulo Costa who hasn't fought in 1.5 years coming in there with not the best cardio, if he's anything similar to these instances we've seen him in the past. So I'm going Robert Whitaker to get this one done by finish in the second or the third round.
I like it. Yeah, I definitely like the Robert Whitaker pick quite a bit. All right, on to the main event. We got Alexander Volkanovski fighting Ilia Topuria. And I just want to ask everyone at home to just put the Islam Makhachev head kick loss out of your brain. Forget about that. Outside of the fact of the headspace that Volk was in at that time, he's made a big point of saying how much he was drinking at that time. There was a lot of weird stuff going on there, and maybe that's why Volk lost. But to me, if you've seen Rocky III, this saga with Ilia Topuria and Volkanovski feels like the first time that Clubber Lang and Rocky Balboa fight. And I'm a huge Volk fan, and I think that he's probably one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. Definitely the greatest featherweight of all time, in my opinion. I think he's surpassed Aldo and Max and all those guys, obviously. But it doesn't feel like there were a lot of struggles in a lot of those fights. Maybe the Max fights, but then you look back, like the Brian Ortega fight was difficult. But there were only 2 moments in that fight where you really thought that Brian Ortega had a chance. There weren't really any moments in the Yair Rodriguez fight where you thought that he had a chance. There's a lot of these guys just had like skill sets. Korean Zombie, they were kind of, I'm not going to say that they were like layup fights or anything for Volk, but in terms of where they stand and where Ilia Topuria stands with the skill set, the tenacity, the power, he combines it all. He's got jiu-jitsu, great jiu-jitsu. And you look at the way that he's dismantled a lot of his competition so far. Ilia Topuria is a scary man. He really is. You've made a point of talking about Georgian fighters. Ilia Topuria is from Georgia by way of Spain. We're starting to see him speak English. That's usually a indicator that someone's on the verge of like star power. He's been speaking really good English, but where I get to with the whole Rocky 3 thing is Volk is now going on like his media. You see him catching footballs from Tom Brady. I ate that up. I loved it. He's doing that little video. Is Volk too old? And Ilia Topuria is just talking about how it's his destiny to win the belt. He seems so, he seems vindicated in what he's saying. His confidence is unreal. And like, a lot of the times when fighters speak something into existence like this, it does happen. There is something to the power of manifestation and the power of belief. And I think that Ilia Topuria, like with his Instagram bio being undefeated UFC champ for so long, like, call me crazy, but there is something to the power of manifestation and belief. And we've seen it time and time again. Like an Islam Makhachev is the kind of guy that goes, it's my destiny to be the champ. And he's probably going to go on a run with the belt. It is intangible, but that does come into effect. And Volk, this is a different skill set, a different challenge. He's coming off a loss. His mental headspace is still in question. No matter what he tells us about how he's doing, he was like in a weird mental headspace going into that Islam Makhachev fight. So with all that, I think I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria. I think it's crazy. I think Volk is going to come in here still a little mentally weaker than Ilia. Ilia is so confident. He's got such a skill set. I think that you're going to see a tentative Volk. He did just get knocked out, and we've seen guys come back from getting knocked out and not be the same, and it was his first knockout loss. He is getting up there in age. He's making jokes about it, but like statistically, once you hit 35, you start to plummet as a UFC fighter. He was on the cover of UFC 5 this year. Like or 4 or 5, whatever it was. He's got a lot of stuff going against him, unfortunately, in terms of like where he's at in his career and curses and things like that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Drake lay out a bet on Alexander Volkanovski too, just because of who he is and the name power that he carries at this point. So I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria. I mean, look at the odds. It's minus 110. Vegas clearly does not think that Volk is that guy anymore either. And I hate to say it, but Ilia Topuria, I think we're going to hear and new after this fight, and it's going to be, the twilight of Alexander Volkanovski's career. So I'm going with Ilia Topuria. And I hate to say it because everyone knows I'm a huge Volk fan, but it is what it is. What do you got, Tom?
Yeah, I don't have the exact statistic, but I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like older fighters versus younger fighters in a championship fight. The younger fighter is like 14-6.
Yeah, something like that.
5 of those losses, the older fighter was Alexander Volkanovski, meaning that he has defied that age prejudice time and time and time again. As he gets older, it's only going to be louder questions. It doesn't know it, that will never stop. That's kind of just how, father time and age works in professional sport. Doesn't matter how many times Tom Brady is going to win a Super Bowl. They're still going to be like, yeah, but can he do it now a year older? Is this the year that everything derails? So I think it's a totally normal mindset, especially considering he just got knocked out. Here are the caveats that I will have for Volk coming into this fight. Number one, I think him making jokes about it, while it can be construed as Rocky-esque in the sense that he's on the magazines and he's all over the place, but I think it could also be in that he is comfortable with the loss. He's comfortable with the jokes that are being made about him, and he's confident enough to be like, yeah, that's what they say, but I'm going to show you again. Every time that I've seen Volk in an interview, I get airs of confidence, but not cockiness. And I think the cockiness is what really concerns you. You know, you see Rocky and he's whatever. I think they were trying to construe that air of invincibility that comes with winning, Hollywood. Here's the thing about Volk. He doesn't have that air of invincibility. He's already taken his loss, but it didn't have to come at the cost of his featherweight legacy. I think him, drinking or whatever, jumping in on that Islam fight and taking that loss via knockout for like the first or second time in his career, first time in a long time at the very least, I think that's the wake-up call of like, okay, I need to be serious about my legacy and about this. Shortly thereafter, I think it was a couple of weeks, he gave an interview where he was in the gym and he was like, yeah, I want them to write me off. Like, I'm just going to show I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to, so I think he's got it. And I think he's got the right mindset. And what we're seeing as potential Hollywood is just him being him, because he can do both, and he's done both for a while. There's the cooking with Volk thing. Like, he's been in the limelight for a long time. So I think that if anybody is built to be able to do both, it would be Volk, because he's such a down-to-earth guy. He knows who he is, and he breeds confidence. On the other hand, you have Ilia Topuria, and yes, he's gone through some really, really tough guys. He's 14-0, and but his airs on cockiness. And cockiness can sometimes be damaging towards the brain. And you go in there, and then as soon as you're met with adversity, right? Because he hasn't had too much adversity recently. As soon as he's met with adversity, it's like, oh shit, have I been hyping myself up? Have the people around me just become yes men? Or like, am I as good as I think it calls a lot of things into question when you're cocky, not confident. And I see Ilia as being cocky because he hasn't quite proven it yet. And, maybe it will come out to be confidence later, but confidence without it being backed up is cockiness. Volk, I don't think is cocky because he's backed it up, and he has just this air of confidence. It's not even falling into the cockiness area. I like everything I see from Volk. You got to be concerned at 35 years, as you would at any point for a champion who's been a long standing, that, hey, this could be the fight, but maybe it's not. And, you look back at matchups, and I know matchups, MMA math doesn't necessarily work, but Alex Volkanovski at featherweight has dismantled pretty much everyone up until this point. The only time we've ever seen a chink potentially in the armor is against either Max Holloway, who is in the other conversation of greatest featherweight of all time, or Islam Makhachev at lightweight. In which case he finished that first fight on top of Islam, going ones and twos, raining down from the top position. So with that being said, I think he has the potential to go to 155 and have success there because of his build and his time at rugby and just his overall, mentality for the most part. So Ilia Topuria, he's just coming off a decision victory over Josh Emmett. I think Volk is faster than Josh Emmett at this point in his career, and I think he hits and can finish just the same as Josh Emmett could. I think Josh Emmett has more one-strike power, but I think Volk's accumulation and variability in his strikes can land some, on the chin after someone's been beaten up. His speed doesn't seem to deteriorate as he goes. He picks his shots really well. He's very intelligent, and he defends extremely well. So I think the defense is going to hold up. We've seen him against guys who can grapple. He's just fought Islam Makhachev. I don't think Ilia's grappling is going to be anywhere near Islam Makhachev. Jesus Christ, I can't get this straight. So I think he's already covered in the grappling. When it comes to striking, I don't think Ilia is presenting too much more than Max Holloway. A little bit more power, yes, but not IQ necessarily. I think Volk is going to go in there and he's going to show us all why he's freaking Volk, man. And I'm pumped to see it. -110, I'm taking the champ at even. I'm taking him to get it done. I don't know if he'll finish him, but I do think Ilia Topuria is going to realize, okay, there's levels to this. There's Josh Emmett, and then there's Alexander Volkanovski.
You're right. There are levels to it. It's just, like I said, the headspace and, is he too comfortable being the champ right now? Is he too comfortable? Like, there's it's it's an odd one.
If he had beaten Islam, then I think he becomes a much bigger, a much bigger candidate to having the fall that you're talking about. Because then he's like, oh, I could do this coming in on short notice and beat a weight class up. Oh, I'm the man. I'm invincible. The fact that he does think he's invincible, goes up and does it, and he loses, I think that's going to mean a lot. That's going to be the splash of cold water. Here's the other thing, too. He did go into that fight with Islam. If he took that fight, it was something about a contract, that taking that fight added a bunch of zeros or made, his contract go up, not just for that fight, but for future fights. So I think that was partly in the mentality of like, all right, if I just go in there and I fight Islam, even though it's on short notice, that's going to set me up for the future. So I think that was potentially why he did it. But again, if he was drinking and he wasn't training, and then that was the outcome, whereas when he is training, the outcome was a much closer fight that he probably could have won had he had the same level of training this go around. I think he's going to have that level of training for Ilia. I think he's going to, have something to prove because he just lost and because people are potentially quick to write him off. So I like everything about Ilia about Alexander for this fight. Maybe a Freudian slip, but Ilia is going to be a star if he wins, and if not, he's going to have a long journey back because people are going to, he's probably going to have to just stay off the internet for a couple weeks.
It depends on how the fight goes, like if it's like a controversial ending, then, he's still vindicated in being as confident as he is because he hung in there.
No, but he says he's going to finish Volk in the first round. He says he's going to totally dismantle him. Yeah, talking that big, you have to back it up. Even if he wins by decision, he's still going to look silly because he doesn't dismantle Volk. So he's got to hope he's going to knock him out.
I don't know if I don't know if he looks silly just for saying that, because that's where the confidence comes in, and every fighter says that. If he goes in there and wins a 5-round decision against Volk, that's still he beat the greatest of all time. That still leaves his mark regardless. You can't say that like, oh yeah, you didn't finish him in the first round, but you still beat the greatest of all time.
Yes, I know, but if you're saying like, oh, I'm going to beat the shit out of this team, we're going to beat them by 50 points, and then you beat them by a field goal, it's like, yeah, okay, like you still won, but like you didn't live up to the hype that you set for yourself.
A win in this case against literally the greatest featherweight of all time, a win is a win. If you come out with the W, it doesn't matter how you do it. It literally does not matter how you do it against the greatest of all time. If you come out with a W, you beat the greatest. So like that's just how it goes.
But again, I still think he's going to end up looking stupid because he created all this hype around a finish, and it's like, yeah, but you didn't. So like, congrats, you're the champ, but you're still, I don't think he's going to get it's going to be the same rocket to superstardom,
Yeah. I don't know, man. Yeah, sure. Like if he finishes Volk, then yeah, he's an instant superstar, especially like early and whatever. But
like if McGregor didn't finish Aldo in spectacular fashion, yeah, he would have gotten a lot of hype, but he would not have been the world phenom. If he's talking all this shit and then just wins the decision, it's like, it's not the accelerator that it could have been.
There was also a world tour with that fight.
It got canceled and rebooked. Like,
yeah,
fair enough in that regard.
There was like 2 years of worldwide hype. Like, I don't know. I've seen Ilia Topuria go on like the MMA Hour and Brett Okinomo, and that's pretty much it. Like, it's not like this is.
It's all they do anymore. There's really no world tours for anything.
No, you don't even see like hype videos like they used to make. But it's not like this is like the fight of the century or anything either. It's going to be a war of attrition. But look at this. It's taking place in Anaheim, California. It's going to be a war. It's going to be one that we talk about probably come, Sunday morning, but it's not the fight of the year. It's not the fight of the century. The hype around it hasn't been crazy. Like the UFC 300 stuff is going to be more nuts than this. One thing I do want to mention too is like, yeah, Volk didn't train going into that Islam fight. He took it on 9 days notice. One thing we have to keep in mind though, is like, your mental acuity should never go away, and getting head kicked the way that he did was a mental error because of the way that it was set up. And I don't like that because so what I was getting into before is it was a little bit of a round robin, in the featherweight division where you had guys like Brian Ortega, the Korean Zombie, Max Holloway. They had all fought each other within the same circles. Yair Rodriguez. And you have now a different, interesting challenge, and Islam Makhachev beats Volkanovski. You have now another interesting, different challenge in Ilia Topuria. Sure, the wrestling isn't on par with Islam's, but and honestly, maybe even the power and the striking. Well, Islam, I don't know. Islam, that head kick that showed great kickboxing and everything. His kickboxing is great overall, but I think with the way that Ilia puts it all together, it's spectacular. And Volk puts it all together too. But I just feel like at this point in his career, Ilia is going to be a step faster. And I think Volk is going to be worried about getting knocked out again. I think that's an actual problem for him. We'll see. But if he comes out tentative from the jump, we'll know what kind of fight it's going to be. You know, if Volk looks a little scared of the feints and stuff, because Ilia does feint quite a bit. If he gets him to bite on those, it could be a problem. You know, like that more than anything, is he worried about getting his legs put out? Are we going to see him elect to go with grappling and try to take Ilia down and go into that realm? Because we've seen him do that with guys like Yair, scoop and dump him up against the fence. So it's going to be an interesting one, but I think that Volkanovski, like we've seen a lot of champs, a lot of turnover with belts recently. And there's a chance we see, more turnover. There's been a lot of shakeup in a lot of these divisions, and this would be a huge shakeup. And it would, all these questions about this division, who's next after this, for Volk, like if he beats Ilia, who would it be? All those questions go out the window if Ilia wins. Now it's all of a sudden, who's Ilia going to fight? Any number of those guys that we just mentioned. So, there's a lot to look forward to either way. Anyways, I got Ilia. You got Volk. You want to do our pick rundown? Alrighty, so from the top, or from the bottom, I suppose, starting with the very first fight, I'm going with Miranda Maverick over Andrea Lee. I'm going with Rinya Nakamura over Carlos Vera. And then when we move up to the main card, I have Roman Kopylov over Anthony Hernandez. Merab Dvalishvili over Henry Cejudo. I hope I said that right. Merab did make that video about saying his name. I got Geoff Neal over Ian Garry. Unpopular pick, potential upset. Robert Whitaker over Paulo Costa. And in the main event, I got Ilia Topuria over Volkanovski. Another unpopular pick. And I just want to be clear, I am a Volkanovski fan. I would like to see him win, but I think Ilia is going to get it done. What do you got, Tom?
I got Miranda Maverick over Andrea Lee. I have Val Woodburn and Oban Elliott going to decision. I have Rinya Nakamura over Carlos Vera by submission. I have. I think I'm gonna stay away from that fight because it could be either way. I just found it very interesting. It's Marcos Rogerio de Lima and Justin Tafa. I have Roman Kopylov over Anthony Hernandez. Yeah, Roman Kopylov over Anthony Hernandez. Merab Dvalishvili over Henry Cejudo. Still gotta go with Ian Garry over Geoff Neal, though I would love to be wrong on that. Rob Whitaker taking on Paulo Costa. I got Bobby Knuckles on that, and I think the champ retains. Volkanovski, 145-pound goat, finish it. I don't know. I think he wins a decision over Ilia. Yeah,
it's going to be a war. I think it's going to be a long 5-round war. And by the end of it, some people are going to have some questions about what happens next. I do want Volk to win, but, we'll see what happens. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your Super Bowl Sunday to hang out with me, you, Tom, and the people at home. Appreciate all you for being here. Just want to remind everybody, please like, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Really helps out the channel. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. X and Instagram @_PickinWinners. And you can follow us individually on X, formerly known as Twitter, @Pickin Fights Tom and @Pickin Keith. Tom, one last question. Who do you got today in the big game?
It could be, as a Raider fan, I don't want to see the Chiefs win, but if they do, it would give us an opportunity to beat them twice a year. the 49ers and the Raiders have a history, but obviously they're the NFC, so might want to watch them. I don't really care, man. I don't care.
Yeah.
I just can't wait to see Allegiant Stadium put on display for all to see. That place is freaking gorgeous. So excited for everyone to get the first prime time kind of 100% view of Allegiant Stadium, and hopefully the Raiders will be back in the Super Bowl sometime soon. Let's go, AP.
All right, so you heard it here first. Tom wants the Chiefs to win. He can't wait for Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce to get married on the field after the game. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Sunday. Enjoy the game.